cancel it right now, not to do it. And then he's bringing rules essentially and ordinances for the personal health, for personal body, the body of us, and our soul and spirit and relationship. It's all more of a protections. These are not, exactly speaking, causes you to spiritually grow. No. I'll list some of it. It's here. One of them is prayer. Prayer is the most important thing in all the religions, you know. Baha'i faith, prayer is so important that it just shows a relationship between you and your God. Baha'u'llah says, okay, you know I exist, I ask you to do something, to do the prayer. So you do the prayer. It's beautiful. Ironically, if you're not a Baha'i and you do the prayer, that will stop you from becoming a Baha'i. That prayer becomes an obstacle, becomes a weight on you. But backward, when you become a Baha'i, that uplifts you. As long as it is in a closed room, it's not a demonstration of your faith to others. Prayer is something, communication between you and your God, because it makes you to feel good. Baha'u'llah doesn't need this. You cannot possibly praise him for what he has done for you and what he has suffered in the planet to bring it up. But it's a sense of my understanding of what you have done, and I'm going to praise it. It's very uplifting. The Baha'i obligatory prayer is very, very important. So important, Abdul says, I do not want to hear the word binamaz, means the person who does not pray. It's very, very bad. You have to do it. But it's not as vital as you think it is, because Baha'u'llah says if you missed it, if you missed prayer or fasting, it's okay, he says. You don't need to repeat it and come back and do it. As in the Islam religion, you have to come back and do it. Baha'u'llah says just go do some good things for people. Do some benevolences. Get engaged in helping instead. So prayer is a very special thing. You got to remember, if you think prayer and fasting and pilgrimage and some of the things that is in the Baha'i faith, if you do that and then you're a Baha'i and that's the end of it, you are sadly mistaken, brother. If that's what you think Baha'u'llah is, it's like taking a book and its cover, it's just Baha'i faith. When you open it, it's all playbook. It's all the Playboy magazines in it. That's what it is. A prayer and a fasting, it does not have an understanding and a meaning of a Baha'i life. Throw it in garbage. Those who killed the Bab, they were all praying. All these huge Baha'is right now, great in their fasting and prayers, they're opposing me like crazy. Because they think we've done everything good. And then they forget what they're doing to the faith of God and to themselves. You see, if you are not praying and you are not fasting, you can become a Baha'i. But if you're jealous, cruel, you can never become a Baha'i. Never. If you're arrogant, or you're engaged in materialism, love of money and sex, you cannot become a Baha'i. Love of the material and sex can stop you from becoming a Baha'i. So is arrogance. Arrogance is the biggest problem that the spirit can have. It's a chronic disease. You have AIDS if you have arrogance. Only he can fix you. And then jealousy. People are cruel. It is impossible for these people to become a Baha'i. But thousands of other people who are not drinking, cracking, any damn things, they can become Baha'i. Even homosexual can become a Baha'i. But not an arrogant man. And unfortunately, the prayer and fasting and these superficial things, it can make people to become arrogant. It's like one of those medicines that it has some good in it, but there's a lot of side effect. You have to be careful, very, very careful for doing prayer or fasting. It's the greatest feeling when you're fasting. I can't explain it to you how big it is. There's great many use to it. It gives you willpower. You learn to say no in the life. Because by the time when you have to eat, But by same token, if you think those who can't do it or they're not doing, you're better than them, brother, stop fasting immediately. If you think by your fasting and by your prayer, by going pilgrimage and doing some this identification things, protecting things that you're doing, now you have become better than others, you have entered into the kingdom, of the hell. Baha'u'llah says immediately when these questions of I am better, who is worse, comes in, that's it. We're outside of the Baha'i parameter. You're doing these things to feel good for yourself, your relationship with your Lord. Definitely it can, prayers and fasting and all of that can create a sense of obedience to your God. It's crazy if we do not obey God. I've seen a lot of arrogant macho people. When they become Baha'i and they do fasting and they do praying, they become calm and quiet individuals. I've seen it. But by same token, the arrogance and things can go inside and grow up after sometimes. Because all they do for being a Baha'i is what? This prayer and fasting and all this. So there's prayers, there's fasting, there's pilgrimage, which I explained it to you. And there's baha'u'llah, the right of God in the Baha'i faith. When your necessities are paid off, which is your house and your car and everything else, if you have extra 19% of that, you owe it to God. So if your house is paid off, your car is paid off, your all necessity is gone, and you have $1 million, you have 19% of that you have to pay to the right of God. You have to pay once in your lifetime, though. There's no more. But you have to pay that. One of these things, for example, is very nice, is a burial of the dead. I can't even speak to you about that. But in the Baha'i faith, no cremations allowed. Definitely the body has to be kept as it is. Possibly if the person has to put it in a shroud of silk, 9 of them around the hand, around the wrist, around the legs, and one on the body with the greatest name, picture, Ya baha'u'llah, God is glorious. You have to put it in your finger. There's reasons for that. It's beyond this time right now that I can talk. One of them, Baha'u'llah says that very, very important, extremely important, for a person to have a job. He says you have to know some kind of a way of making money. You have to know a trade, he says, or farming. It's very, very important. Bob says if you could possibly be self-employed. But of course we can work in the other factories and so on, as long as, like in the West, it's pretty good. So one of the things that the Baha'is are protecting the Baha'i society now, those were individual things. The Baha'i society is protected, There are 12 principles in the Baha'i faith. It's very, very important, those principles that define the various structure and constitute an individual in the society. I'll be talking about those things later on. But one of the things for the protection of a Baha'i in the Baha'i society is the Baha'is do not interfere into the politics. This is a question I've been asked thousands of times. The answer is very, very simple. Baha'is cannot interfere or participate into the politics of a country because it is limited to that country. If I enter into the politics of Canada, I have to just be thinking about Canadian. When I meet an American, he's standing opposing me. Or for that matter, an Afghani or a Japanese. Baha'i faith does not accept that. Any ideology that you follow, that is keeping the interest of a limited area of the geographical area of people. One. Secondly, it is in our position against another country. How could a Baha'i enter in Afghanistan or in Japan or in Iran or in Scandinavia or in Greece, anywhere you like it? To be in a society, to become the member of a parliament or become the president of the country, where he has to defend his country against the neighboring people. He has to think about protection of his people, not caring about other people. Even if it means to cheat them, he has to. We can't participate in that. Baha'is, they believe there is regional, there is local, but a local and a region has to have a universal government. Without universal government, The body does not have a head. I've spoken about this and I will be talking about that later on. So that's a definition of a planet, and where there is a universal government. Shaw Effendi says there was no problem for us to have a government in a city. It benefited us, created code, roads, everything. Right of people, peace. So is in a country. What's wrong if we have a universal government? To stop this wastage of his army and go to the real fight, to the nature. Desert in Africa is progressing by the wind, taking the sands and getting the fertile land every day. Why aren't you stopping that? Disease coming from everywhere throughout the planet. What do? The real fight is the tsunami in Japan right now. That is the battle you gotta get engaged. You're fighting each other. The reason is because you have army. The reason is because you don't have a head. As soon as you have a head, countries are still remain the same in the universal government. But there's no army. And the international rule and the human right everywhere and the environment and all that comes in. That's something again we have to talk. I remember when I became Baha'i, I have to admit to this, today I do. I did start smoking maybe a couple of years before that. Once only. There was a fellow, his name is Ahmed. He took me and gave me some hashish or pot, you call it. Oh my God, I had that. I think I stoned because I came with such a headache. I was like vaccinated against this forever. I said, I cannot do this forever. Another time, my other friend, Taghi was his name, in the Damran where I was, he was trying to make me to forget Emma. So he gave me opium. Apparently, according to them, opium when you cannot have salad or something, and I took some of that. Oh my God. I was in the class, night school I remember. As soon as I started to talk, I threw up in the class. Teacher immediately knew what happened. He sent me home. That was the last of it in my life. I used to have beer, I remember, very occasionally. And I used to smoke. But this did not trouble me at all. I usually became a Baha'i. That didn't stop me. But I saw my brother, who was like such a nice guy in every aspect. His name is Ali, one of the best of the 5 brothers. He did not become a Baha'i. He couldn't see it. Whatever I told him. And I just saw that he's infected with this prayer and this fasting and all of this Islamic ritual he does.